Very soon, Mike Braun will be sworn in as Indiana's 52nd governor. And while we know a lot about Mike Braun, the politician, there's still a lot to learn about how he got here and how he wants to govern. In a 13 News exclusive, I sat down with Mike Braun and his wife Maureen at their home in Jasper to discuss their life, their politics, and the legacy they hope to leave behind. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. You have a beautiful home.
Thank you.
I can see why you want to spend as much time as you can here. So you plan to live here pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean, it will be no different than the Senate gig in the sense that there I was a frequent flyer, and that was 36 weeks out of the year in a non-election year, 32 in an election year. And I pretty well, would drive either to Louisville or Indianapolis. And by the time you get to the airport and wait around on the plane, get there, and then do it in reverse, it was 10 to 12 hours each week. And that'll be the part that I got used to, but I'll definitely be happy that it's in the rearview mirror.
What do you love so much about Jasper?
The people, for sure. The community. I mean, having a small business, we get full community support. We wouldn't be here without them. And also, it really has everything we pretty much need. We have enough entertainment, enough dining that we like, and enough shopping and all that. So really, it's just the people. They're really down to earth, and they're just good, common sense, conservative people who, a lot of them church going, and a lot of them just are faith-based, hardworking entrepreneurs, and just a great community for our size.
And you grew up here, right? Mm-hmm. Both of you?
Yes.
She in town and me on the outskirts of the big town of Jasper of 8,000 back in the 60s and 70s, and kind of knew one another all along the way. Didn't communicate much though, did we, till
no,
our senior year. So I always felt that was interesting because we were in homerooms together and all of that. And of course, you never know how things are going to work out, but it worked out well, didn't it?
It worked out real well, yes. He was a little pestery, in the younger days, but we were alphabetical in many situations. So I was Berger, he was Braun, and we were right next to each other competitively and also in many instances. So, we knew each other very well.
Sometimes it just has to grow on you.
He grew on you.
Over time, he grew on me, and I grew on him, yes. Yeah.
What brought you back to Jasper? Because you left for a time, right?
I think that, she went to IU, got a business degree, and I went to Wabash College as a pre-med student with 4 other classmates, and they all got their MDs, and I veered from biology to political science to economics, and didn't really know what I wanted to do through most of college, and was headed to Vanderbilt on a JD MBA, which was 3 years back then, I think still is now. And I kept reducing the amount of time because I really wanted to be a surgeon. Of course, that's 9 years. Yeah. And I kind of knew that, but when I heard it, there was no way to get it shorter than that. That's when I shifted majors, and then ended up going into business school directly out of college and took the first entrepreneurs course at business school. And that would have been the second half of the second year, and you're there 2 years. So then it went from kind of thought I was going to Wall Street because I was good at numbers and finance, and that was the highest paying job back then. But you wanted your own business. I now was kind of thinking more entrepreneurially than, say, captain of industry, and management consulting would have been the other thing you do, or, like I say, go to Wall Street. And something called us back, and probably the smartest thing we ever did when we collectively made that decision with no guarantees, because I think back then that was like a highest starting pay you could get coming out of business school, and best job I could find here, it was about an 80% pay cut. And I'm glad I did it. Worked 3 years for the local kitchen cabinet company, and then took a shot in a business that was kind of wobbly, selling mostly to farmers. And that was when interest rates were 10%. That's where our first home mortgage was. And soon went up nearly to 20%. And so things didn't look like they were going to fall in place, but they ended up, working out.
Yeah. And so you started, what was the name of your shop?
Finishing Touches gift store. So I worked at Filene's department store in Boston, and then also at Ann Taylor in Cambridge Square, and felt like I had a good, background in buying and in merchandise, and just graduated. Thought, wow, this should be good. So I felt confident to open up a store that early in my life, and it worked out great. But we also moved back here because of family. I mean, family is a strong tie for us, and siblings and others that we knew. We just really wanted to build that relationship in our life with family.
What does your family make of you becoming governor?
Well, I think I'd say the biggest surprise is when I decided to run for Senate, because I'd been on our local school board 10 years. That call came for her, and she kind of very articulately said she didn't have time to do it and offered me up, which I'm glad you did. Probably wouldn't be here. So that kind of gives you the feeling, I think, for anyone, if you've got the temperament and the interest in, say, public service of some sort. And then the local state rep called me, Mark Messmer, who's now the 8th District congressman-elect, when he wanted to run for state senate. And I did that. That was elected in 14, served 15, 16, and 17. And then was going to go back to my business. But 2 sons, and about that time is when Kristen started working for the business. I just said, hey, I'm going to give it a shot running for Senate. And I'll never forget when you asked me, where are you at in the first poll? And I said, well, we rounded up to 1%. And that was, for many people, a fool's errand, because it hardly had ever been done before, but I felt real good about the underpinning of it. So I think there they were surprised, and then even more surprised when you pulled it off. So here, I think there was less surprise. It was a pretty defined fork in the road. It was either or, so I had to either give up a seat or keep the seat. And once I decided to run for governor, you either had to win that, or of course you were going to be back in the real world, as I call it. And that, I think, surprised people less than running for Senate in the first place.
And go ahead.
Well, we're all very proud of him, first of all, because we know that he's got the intelligence, he's got the background, he's got the ability to really do all these things. And even though he was 1%, he could only go up. I kept thinking of the positive. But on the other hand, it really made sense because of his ability to really see through a lot of things. He plans ahead. His experience in the business just made me confident that if he wanted to do this, he's very smart at looking at things and just analyzing them. So even though it was 1%, I of course had my doubts, but I trusted him to move forward because he's just got a good way of looking at things. And it worked out. But our family overall is just very proud of him because they know him well. They know how hard he worked.
What did you think when he said he had decided to run for governor and leave the Senate?
I was a little hesitant because I felt like we needed his voice at the federal level. Conservative, spending less money. Overall, I think he got more inspired because of our grandchildren. He really wants to have everybody's grandchildren have a lot to look forward to, and it looks pretty much doom and gloom at this point. But then when he explained to me about coming back, and a lot of the level at the state level is really where things are going to happen, he convinced me that that was definitely the right move too. So I feel very confident that he's making the right move for himself, even though it was unusual.
Now, this is a new role for you. This puts you on a different
Yes.
level than wife of a senator. You'll be the First Lady of Indiana.
I
Are you
know.
ready for that?
It's such an honor. I will take it and do everything I can to make it worthwhile for everybody. I like to give back anyway, and we do a lot in the community, and I just feel like this is a great way to give back. But probably I don't know what all I'm getting into, but it will be a wonderful adventure that it's a great honor.
Are there any particular causes or initiatives that, given your platform, you feel like you want to invest in and
I
lift
actually
up?
have several, so I'll probably have to narrow down. But women in business, entrepreneurship is probably my first one. And then kind of related to that is Main Street America, which I've been active in our city getting a 501c3 with Main Street America as a national organization and kind of putting that to a local level. And then helped a little bit with junior achievement, so I'd love to see that going back into the schools all over the state in a more intense level. I used to help out at school when my children were little, so I really have empathy for a lot of the teachers. Their classroom size in the grade kindergarten through third are just way too large. Hopefully we can work on things within the school, get the reading better, and then know a lot of family with cancer, so there would be a way that hopefully I can work on that too. So a lot of different things I would like to help with.
What do you think will help keep you grounded or sane in this, what can be a maddening cycle of life?
Well, for me, I think our life has been grounded, from the moment we moved back here, because it was not your typical kind of career ascension that you might have been looking for. I worked in a little town near here, not even in Jasper, for 17 years, and always talk about the office being in a used mobile home and an old facility. And it took 17 years to come up with an idea that was closer to what I had in mind. And it was so wrapped into this community in general. Like when we finally did move into Jasper in '98 after 17 years, it was just nice to have a loading dock. It's nice to have a office that wasn't in a rundown mobile home. And then I think of all the distance we've covered since then, and all along the way grounded to the community. So never was going to move a headquarters out of the place. A unique thing about Jasper is every business of any size has been started by local entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. That's unusual. Normally you try to lure businesses in from the outside. Here we've been lucky, I think, because of that work ethic, that entrepreneurialism, that we've always had community legacy of being entrepreneurial. So, and never forgetting, your roots, the hard work that others put in front of you. And the grounding part of it has always been easy, because that was pretty well woven into our fabric.
And with him being grounded always and really not stressed out, he's really one that can handle things very well. It kind of, comes down to us too, where we can be more calm and more grounded too. But I feel like the grounded part would be very easy for us. We intend to keep our connections here, go back and forth. And really for every day for us, I still plan to have my business where I will be loading things and unloading and doing whatever needs to be done, taking out the trash if needed. I try to do whatever my staff would do, I can do it too. So we are helping together. So I don't feel like that's going to change at all.
Let's talk about the transition. How are you balancing your duties in the Senate with becoming governor of Indiana?
So Senate duties go through the end of this year. And practically speaking, that would be right up before Christmas. One thing that we've done not well there is budgeting, and we're loading up future generations with debt, which to me is shameful. But I've been a loud voice on that topic on the budget committee, which doesn't do much simply because it's atrophied into that. But on a committee, health, education, labor, and pensions, still some active stuff that we're maybe trying to get across the finish line, and put a heck of a staff together, and blessed with a very good one that enabled us to be the most active and productive freshman Senate office over the last 6 years, and in places like education, healthcare, agriculture, getting more legislation done than any of the other Republican offices, some that have been there for a long time. So that means even there, you can do things out of a framework of what the norm is. I'm a big believer in term limits, so I wasn't going to do it more than 2 terms. It's just kind of bittersweet when you have a team like I've had. Many of them are coming back to Indiana with me. I'll miss some components of it, but it's got to fix itself before it's going to be doing the job the American people deserve. And Maureen mentioned it earlier. I really think, just like the founders intended, most of the issues are going to be crafted by entrepreneurial state governments that live within their means. We got 50 of them as a laboratory of how things should work, and hopefully that'll rub off, and the federal government will maybe get back to the 2 or 3 things it ought to do well, and that would mean not borrowing money to cover your bad performance.
You took some heat last week from some Republicans. The President-elect Trump tweeted, "Republican senators need to show up and hold the line. No more judges confirmed before Inauguration Day." What about that? If you had it to do all over again,
that's
would it be
interesting, because when you know how it works, of course, 3 of them were with President Trump. And I was the only one that had an excused absence because of the Republican Governors Association orientation meeting for the new governors-elect, and was on call, and none of those votes would have ended up keeping a judge from being appointed, in the sense that they had it covered with Kamala in town. So when the other 4 senators got back and I got the call, we all came back and will be there through December. But that was more hype, and I think it was aimed at the other 4 because they knew where I was. And it was kind of an excused absence. And again, it didn't result in one judge that we could have prevented, because Kamala was in town for that time to break the vote.
So once you move out of the office in the Senate, you're inaugurated, sworn in governor, move into the office. What is priority number 1?
So I've said very clearly, you can get complacent when you've been now 20 years under the same party. They tried to use that as a campaign spiel, but it didn't work, because I think folks know I come from a different pathway, and that it's going to be entrepreneurial. The running of the state like a business is going to be easy. I did that for 37 years, but I'll look at every agency, 80 of them in total, 30 to 35 major ones, make sure they're being run well and efficiently, and I'm almost certain we can probably spend less and get better results. And that'd be how you'd finance new areas of policy, or even more likely, how you reduce taxes over time. So those first 100 days will be about making sure government is working like it's supposed to, and then work on the policy initiatives, which would be getting property taxes to where they can never do what they've done over the last 3 years of exploding way beyond the growth of our economy, and then workforce education, which is half of our budget, K through 12, another 15% post-secondary, and then the biggest area and the place I'm proudest of what I've done in government, but especially fixing the high cost of health care. I did that in my own business 16 years ago, completely disrupted the normal way you look at insurance, based it on wellness and prevention, not expensive remediation, cut costs by over 50%, have healthier employees, haven't had premium increases now in 16 years. When I tell people that, they think that that's just impossible. No, it's not, but you're poking a big bear there in established health care that gives Hoosiers some of the highest costs in the country with some of the poorest outcomes. And I feel real good that I'm going to know how to do it, even though there's going to be resistance among the providers that are going to need to change the way they do business. Otherwise, we migrate fairly quickly to a one-payer system that would then be federally run, that I don't think any of us would want.
We'll have plenty of time to get into the weeds on the issues, which I think is really important. And I do want to ask you about property taxes really quickly. You ran on a property tax reform plan as one of your priorities, and yet we've heard from lawmakers here and there that we may not be able to overhaul this thing in one session. Do you agree with that? Do you think that a few tweaks are okay, that it will take a number of years to get where Indiana needs to be?
I'd say that's the way typical politicians and government representatives would react, because They don't want to ever do anything that is kind of disruptive. In this case, I think Hoosiers were loud and clear that property tax bills should have never gone up 15 to 20% in a given year, disproportionately impacting the elderly and new homeowners. And by the way, most local governments just didn't lower their tax rates enough to reflect the increase in assessed values, or they could have prevented an issue of property tax bills going up faster than the growth of the economy. So I think that's kind of the default response, because generally it would probably take some time to change something that's been in place. Mitch Daniels saw the need for it, and he did it when we had no inflation back 20 years ago, and the circuit breakers that were based upon assessed values worked until I think Bidenomics gave us inflation that we hadn't seen since the late 70s and early 80s. We'll see. I know the people are going to be on my side, and even if it would take a session or two, as long as we cap rates to where they can never grow faster than the robust growth of the economy, and we reset it to where it doesn't force homeowners, elderly and young, out of their homes, that's all I'm after. Maybe there'll be a better way to do it, and I'll be patient if I think patience is needed. I'll be very persuasive if I think that there's no good reason other than they just don't want to do it.
Speaking of relationships, you are in a bit of a unique situation with your lieutenant governor, someone you did not originally pick or endorse. And he's certainly more outspoken so far than previous lieutenant governors right out of the gate. Do you see that as a challenge, or do you see that as a positive?
I see that as a positive, in the sense that I'd rather you be outspoken about things that may need to be considered or changed. I view it as a challenge only in the sense I would of, say, a really good employee that I've had over the past 37 years before I became a senator, that didn't always do exactly what you wanted him or her to do, but with a little coaching and kind of the combination of the carrot and the stick, you'll use what you can bring to bear to make sure that it's done productively. I think Micah represented the part of the party that felt like they were not taken into consideration. And by the way, that part of the party that has all the passion, does all the work, especially in campaigns and elections, and is just asking for at least equal airtime. And he called me before he decided to run, and I knew him from the day I got elected senator, because he'd bring a conservative group out to D.C., and I'd speak to them each year. I've got priorities that I've laid out, kitchen table in nature, and I know how to get from here to there, and I know how to bring other people with me. But I'd rather have somebody that is kind of pushing the envelope than maybe complacent with things as they are, especially when you need to change some of the things that are to make them better.
1.5 million people voted for you in November. About, if my math is correct, about 1.3 did not. 1.3 million did not. So how do you plan to govern for all Hoosiers in your term?
Well, in the day and age of mandates and landslides, I don't like even using those words, but this was when it was supposed to be a close race, which would generally mean low to mid single digits. We knew it was going to be better than that, and when you almost win by 14%, it's about as good as it gets. And in an open gubernatorial seat, I think you got to go back to maybe Bob Orr in 1980, and that was maybe just 1% or 2% better than that. So,
Excuse me.
Yes, job number one.
Uh-oh, I've got my...
That's okay, just put it in your pocket.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
okay. Well, you might be able to use that
I will,
impromptu.
yes, I think so. I'd like to. Along those same lines, though, I mean, we have a supermajority still at the State House. We have a supermajority still at the State House. You may not always see eye to eye, and then you've got the Democratic side of the aisle.
Yeah.
How do you work together?
Number one, get more legislation passed than any Republican senator. You got to have a Democratic co-lead. So you find things that you generally agree with. They're going to agree with health care reform. That's generally a Republican issue. Republicans say it's free enterprise, don't mess with it. I know it doesn't work like most free enterprise I see. So I'll be able to find areas like that that'll bring the other side of the aisle on board. And in my own caucus, I served with nearly all of them, especially most of the committee chairs in 15, 16, and 17. So I feel real good about that. I'm interactive. I say I'm going to be the most accessible and entrepreneurial governor, and that's going to be true. So that means I'm going to listen to a lot of different people, including folks in my own party and even across the aisle.
Finally, and I'll ask your better half here when she sits back. Actually, oh yeah, I didn't know you're already on your way. That was fast.
That was
Very
fast.
good, dear.
Yes.
I just have one last question, and I'd like to ask you both. What do you hope your legacy will be for Indiana as governor and first lady?
Go ahead, dear.
That's a good question because it will be evolving over the years, I think. But mine would be that we really gave back and made a big difference in each person's life, whether it mostly economically, but also just in our example of family and faith and community and the way we live. We're just ordinary people. We're just people that happen to be elected governor and first lady, and we're very honored to do that. But I think kind of an inspiration for all the people that are looking maybe towards a political life or not, to give back in whatever way they can, whether it's a service as governor or to give back in whatever way they're talented to give back to their community.
And I think for me, when it was kind of a different trajectory to get to become a governor, not from the farm system of politics, but from the real world. I think that I always look back at the history of our own country and think that that was, made up of mostly business owners, farmers, lawyers that practice their trade, all of that stuff, and the idea of freedom and opportunity, because I ran on the freedom and opportunity agenda. And then for us, in just how things unfolded from the time, decided not to do what we thought we were going to do career-wise and move back to our hometown. That's when I always think maybe you got a little divine guidance to do it. So that combination of living the American dream, not having it, thrown in your lap, and it evolved over a big span of time. And when you think back, probably not wanting to change anything. That's a good feeling. And if you can bring that in any form to the rest of Hoosiers, drawing on that experience, I'll consider it, well worth the time and effort to get there.
Thanks again for the opportunity.
You bet.
Really appreciate it. All right.